Chapter 1 Talent Increase Production. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the dark night, the sky was full of star clouds. Below, the black-winged black bird that feeds on corpses hovered over a green spiritual rice field. This bird has an extraordinary sense of smell and can sense the smell of corpses hundreds of miles away. Of course, as a spiritual bird of the bird family, the black-winged black bird also has its own pride. Even if it eats corpses, it only eats them when they are still hot. With a dive, the steel-like wings cut the scarecrow standing in the middle of the spiritual rice field in half, and the sharp claws pounced straight at the corpse on the ground. Suddenly, the black-winged black bird paused, and its falling body hovered in mid-air. Seeing that the corpse that was about to enter its stomach suddenly moved, it let out a mocking hiss, rose into the air in a sullen manner, and finally disappeared. Outside the spiritual rice field, Chen Mo woke up slowly, but he felt a piercing pain in his abdomen instantly. He struggled to sit up, and the next moment, a horrifying scene appeared in front of him. The originally bloody chest, the blood and flesh kept wriggling, growing back together little by little. Within 20 breaths, the pain in the chest gradually subsided, and the healed flesh and skin had become smooth. The fatal wound disappeared in an instant, replaced by another lively time traveler. Chen Mo sorted out his thoughts. He was originally playing a WeChat minigame, and he appeared here with his eyes closed and opened, and now his original body happened to be called Chen Mo. He was a casual cultivator attached to Qingyang sect, Xian Peak, and Guchen Market. The original owner had also imagined joining Qingyang sect. Even if he became a Chore's disciple, he could be regarded as riding on this behemoth. Qingyang sect, as a third-level immortal sect, has great powers in the golden core stage. However, although Chen Mo's body has a talent for cultivating immortals, it is really not much. He barely got a technique and practiced diligently for 5 years, but in the end he was only at the first level of qi refining. Such a talent would not be accepted by a third-level immortal sect like Qingyang sect, and even ordinary cultivator families would not look at him. However, there is always a way out. Although the original owner had average talent, he was quite smooth in dealing with people. He relied on his mouth to rent 3 acres of spiritual fields from Guchen Market and began his career as a spiritual plant husband. Chen Mo searched his memory and tried to recall how he died, but after trying for a long time, there was only a vague figure in black clothes and a bamboo hat in his mind. As for the figure and face, there was no impression at all. So, did the original owner offend some big boss? He was killed in one encounter, but the cultivator who could kill him in an instant, even without any defense, was at least a big boss of the third level of qi refining. It was far beyond the ability of a small spiritual plant husband of the first level of qi refining to contend with him. But it seems that he didn't offend anyone. Chen Mo thought for a long time. The original owner of the body was originally quite cowardly. He didn't dare to offend any cultivator. Suddenly, he realized something. He hurriedly touched his waist, and the next moment, he was dumbfounded. That's right. All the belongings he carried with him were gone, 1 or 2 spiritual sands for cultivation, and 3 bigu pills that he bought at a high price. This was what he had spent all his money to get, and it was also the last resource for cultivation when the spiritual rice matured. Damn! I can't be so unlucky. Didn't you say that if you join the market, you will have a position? Why is there still danger even if you have a position? Chen Mo really couldn't figure it out. The spiritual plant husbands in Guchen Market were so poor, and there were actually cultivators who killed people and robbed goods. Hey! He sighed and slowly stood up. If the spiritual sand was gone, it was gone. At most, he would not practice for 3 months before the spiritual rice matured, but what would he do without the bigu pill? Does it mean that he has to eat mortal grains? In memory, once he stepped into the immortal way of cultivation, he could no longer touch the food of the mortal world. It's okay to eat it once or twice a year, but if you eat it for a long time, your body will be polluted by ordinary grains. Not only will your realm regress, but your body will also age rapidly. Low-level cultivators like Chen Mo can't afford spiritual rice, let alone spiritual fruits and spiritual meat. They can only rely on a few resources to exchange for a few fasting pills to barely survive. Now, even the fasting pills are gone, which is equivalent to taking Chen Mo's life. The beginning of the collapse of the sky. After standing up, Chen Mo looked at the spiritual fields around him. He bought 1 gene of spiritual yellow rice seeds on credit from Boss Wei. This seed is also the cheapest and the lowest quality first-level seed that can be bought in the entire market. The spiritual yellow rice grown can yield about 200 gene per mu, putting aside the fixed rent of 100 gene per mu of Z and Peak. Boss Wei paid 50 gene of seeds and 20 gene per mu as an introduction fee. In the end, he can only get 190 gene of spiritual rice. According to the current market price, 10 gene of spiritual rice can be exchanged for 1 liang of spiritual sand or buy 1 bigu pill. Chen Mo originally planned to buy 12 bigu pills with 190 gene of rice, and exchange the rest for spiritual sand, so that he could have a place to practice in the second year. But now, because the bigu pills were stolen, all the plans were disrupted. Does that mean I have to go to Boss Wei to buy on credit? That he also knew that the so-called Boss Wei didn't have much power and could only be regarded as a chores boy in the market, and bigu pills couldn't be borrowed just like that. Ah! Chen Mo sighed and was in a dilemma for a while. After struggling for a long time, he shook his head with a wry smile, then made a hand gesture, and a cloud of rain gradually gathered above the spiritual field. In a moment, rain containing the spiritual energy between heaven and earth began to fall, nourishing the green spiritual rice field in front of him. Difficulties aside, this spiritual field must be taken care of, otherwise, if the rent cannot be paid at the end of the year, I am afraid that I will be in trouble. Whether my life can be saved by then is still uncertain. Chen Mo concentrated his mind and cast the only spell he mastered, after consuming nearly 1/3 of the spiritual energy in his body. The 3 acres of spiritual field were finally irrigated. Just as he was finishing his work, a bright yellow Chinese character appeared in his sight. Rain spreading technique +1. Huh! This! Chen Mo's heart was instantly excited. He was sure that this was not an illusion. If nothing unexpected happened, this was his golden finger. As soon as the thought came together, a game-like panel appeared in front of Chen Mo. Name, Chen Mo. Occupation, spiritual plant husband, unlocked. Spiritual cultivation officer, unlocked. Lifespan, 2876. Cultivation, first level of qi refining. Skill, cultivation qi ju, 43 out of 100. Spells. Raining technique, beginner 36 out of 100. Flame palm, beginner 21/100. Talent, increase production. Green, increase production. Chen Mo's eyes turned to his talent, increase production. Green, incorporate the spiritual energy of heaven and earth into the art of cloud and rain to increase the production of spiritual plants. This talent can be integrated into the art of raining and other arts, and the output of spiritual fields will increase by 20%. The raining technique can only be integrated after reaching the proficient level. Chapter 2: Killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Increase production. Increase production by 20%. For a moment, Chen Mo's mind was a little confused. He was stunned for a moment, and then a self-deprecating smile appeared on his face. Other people's golden fingers are either immortal or simulated. Why is it that mine is only a 20% increase in production? It seems that I was born to farm. Forget it, it's better than nothing. If the rainmaking technique can be upgraded to proficiency before the spiritual rice matures, the 3 acres of spiritual fields will increase production by 120 kilograms, which is also a considerable income for Chen Mo at the moment. You know, these 120 kilograms are tax-free and completely at his disposal. Just now, I cast the rainmaking technique once, and the experience is directly increased by 1. Does it mean that as long as I keep casting spells, this skill can be upgraded? That the original skillful realm spells were beyond Chen Mo's reach. If it can really cast spells to increase experience, it can be regarded as a good ability. Thinking of this, he pinched the formula again, but when rain clouds gathered on the horizon, he immediately realized that something was wrong. That's not right. After the fall, the spiritual rice needs spiritual rain every 3 days. If it rains twice a day, the moisture will increase and the roots of the spiritual rice will rot. 3 days adds 1 point of experience, and 3 months only adds 30 points, which is not enough to upgrade. Chen Mo was in trouble for a while. he walked towards the small wooden house next to the spiritual field while struggling. This is his house, and it is also the only real estate after renting the spiritual field. There is a defensive formation set up by the formation master of Xian Peak. With it, Chen Mo can enjoy the protection of Guchen Market. As long as he does not make enemies with other cultivators, the market can protect him. However, if he really encounters a desperate cultivator who takes the risk of being hunted down by Xian Peak and fights in the jurisdiction of the market, just like the original owner before, he can only admit his bad luck if he dies. Back to the house, there is a wooden bed, a wooden table, 2 wooden chairs, and then nothing else. It can be said that the family is penniless. After taking off his bloody green cloth gown and changing into a set of ordinary shorts, Chen Mo sat at the wooden table and poured himself a glass of water. He picked up the cup and just put it to his mouth. Suddenly, a flash of inspiration came to him. He suddenly stood forward, raised his head and drank the water in the cup, then pushed the door open and went out. My spiritual field can no longer make rain, but other people's fields can. Chen Mo looked around and saw endless spiritual fields. In addition to the 3 acres he rented, there were other similar spiritual plants around. Xiao Zhonghua in the north is a cultivator who entered the Tao through martial arts. It seems that he has already reached the 2nd level of qi refining. The original owner has dealt with him twice. He is a man with a dark face and is not easy to talk to. What is the name of the person in the south? It seems that he is a tenant in the same batch as me, but he only rented 2 acres. He may not have as much money as me. Chen Mo thought about it and ruled out the neighbors one by one, and finally locked on a female cultivator in the northeast corner of his house. He took a step forward. It was only a few acres of land. As a cultivator, he took half an incense stick of time to reach the scope of Wang Lixia's spiritual field. It was also a green spiritual rice field, planted with first-level spiritual yellow rice. The ground of the rice field had dried up, and it seemed that it had not rained in the past 2 days. Chen Mo came to the other party's wooden house, knocked on the door gently, and called, "Friend Wang, are you at home?" He just asked. As a casual spiritual cultivator in Guchenfang City, where else can he go except staying in the field? Who? An old voice came from the house. I, Chen Mo, your next-door neighbor. Wait a moment. In a moment, the door opened. An old woman in cloth clothes appeared in front of Chen Mo with a hunched back. The person in front of him was Wang Lixia, who was said to be over 80 years old. In her early years, she contracted 5 acres of spiritual fields in Guchenfang City, and she had been farming for decades. However, despite her advanced age, she is the only cultivator at the 3rd level of qi refining in the area of 100 mu. All the spiritual plant husbands in other fields have to show some respect to her. What's the matter? Wang Lixia leaned on a cane. Her eyes were a little cloudy. It looked like she would die of old age soon. Fellow Taoist Wang, I want to ask you for 3 big pills. No. Before Chen Mo finished speaking, the other party immediately refused with a cold face. Big pills are a necessity for low-level cultivators, and are considered hard currency like spiritual rice and spiritual sand. Seeing that Wang Lixia was about to close the door, Chen Mo hurriedly continued, I won't lend it for free. From now on, I will make rain on your 5 acres of spiritual fields until the spiritual rice matures. How about that? Humph. Who knows? The other party still snorted coldly. Just making rain, you want to exchange it for 3 fasting pills. What? Look at me, I'm old and weak. Do you think I'm easy to cheat? Although making clouds and rain is a big burden for spiritual plant husbands, it will take at least a day to restore the depleted spiritual energy by nature. If you want to recover faster, you must use spiritual sand. So, for spiritual plant husbands, most of the time and spiritual energy of cultivation are wasted on taking care of spiritual fields, but what else can we do? It's better to go to the black mine to mine for food. No, fellow Taoist Wang, I'm talking about borrowing, not exchanging. Chen Mo hurriedly explained, I'll return it to you when the spiritual rice in my field matures next year. How about that? After saying this, Wang Lixia's expression suddenly became less ugly. She looked Chen Mo up and down, was silent for a moment, and said, So you haven't practiced for the past 3 months. that she knew very well that with the other party's level, taking care of 8 acres of spiritual land was already at the limit. Apart from meditating and recovering every day, she couldn't do anything else. Practicing is like sailing against the current. Over time, the other party may never be able to break through to the second level of qi refining. Then what can we do? Chen Mo sighed. If the bigu pill is used up, we can't starve to death, right? That he didn't say anything about being robbed. You can't talk about this kind of thing casually. Once other Lingzihas know about it, they will definitely avoid you like the god of plague. Who knows if he has offended someone. None of these solitary spiritual cultivators want to be contaminated by this kind of karma. Wang Lixia hesitated for a moment and then said, deal, after 9 days, I will give you a bigger pill, and then I will give you another one every month. Thank you fellow Taoist for your help. Chen Mo bowed his hands and finally breathed a sigh of relief. The problem of bigu pill has been solved, and so has the problem of practicing the art of rainmaking. Kill 2 birds with 1 stone. Cough. Wang Lixia coughed dryly. She stood up her crutches tremblingly, pointed at the spiritual field in front of the door, and said, just in time, it's time to water the rice in the field. Chen Mo nodded, walked quickly to the center of the spiritual field, and then made a secret with his fingers. The rain clouds are gathering and the weather is favorable. Half an hour later, as the spiritual energy in his dantian bottomed out, the 5 acres of spiritual field also completed this round of rain spreading technique +2. Not bad, not bad. Come back in 3 days. Wang Lixia put her hands behind her back and looked at Chen Mo with complicated eyes. After a long while, she returned to the house and closed the door. Chapter 3 Double Happiness. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Hey, cultivating immortals, cultivating immortals. Wang Lixia leaned against the door frame. Her hunched body gave people a feeling of fragility and infinite melancholy. More than 60 years ago, she, who had spiritual roots, good bones and qualifications, embarked on the road of cultivating immortals that countless mortals envied. At that time, she was in the limelight, and she had secretly made up her mind to form the supreme golden elixir, but her heart was higher than the sky and her life was thinner than paper. There is an old saying in the world of cultivating immortals, if you don't enter the immortal gate for a day, you will be an ant for the rest of your life. Wang Lixia, who failed to join the Qingyang sect, got the identity of a spiritual plant husband under the guidance of a master, and finally settled down in the market. Originally thought that with her own hands, she could also get some resources, not to mention the golden elixir. Even the foundation building would be enough for him to stand out in Xian Peak, but things did not go as she wished. Thinking back to the past, she had also begged other Taoist friends for a bigger pill, and like the Taoist friend Chen outside the door, she had stagnated in her realm and had to borrow a bigger pill by helping others manage their spiritual fields. Wang Lixia saw her past shadow in Chen Mo. And now she has entered a state of decline, and she is afraid that she will not live for many years, so she agreed to borrow the pill. Oh, forget it, we are just fallen people. There was a sigh in the wooden house. Chen Mo opened the panel and saw that the experience of the rainmaking technique increased from 36 to 39, and he was in a good mood. Physically, the fatigue caused by the near exhaustion of spiritual energy was also forgotten by him. You can cast the spell twice in 3 days, and you can get 3 points of experience by watering 8 acres of spiritual fields. At this rate, it will take at least 2 months for the rainmaking technique to break through to proficiency. It's in time. Chen Mo was thinking in his heart, and he had returned to his spiritual field. In the next 2 days, he must hurry up to meditate and practice in order to restore his already depleted dantian. In his memory, the 3 mu of spiritual fields are most suitable for practice, and the place with the most concentrated spiritual energy is the place where the original owner died. Before his death, the original owner meditated there and absorbed the spiritual energy in the spiritual sand. The spiritual fields around the entire Guchenfang city are built on a first-level spiritual vein. Although the quality is not high, it is also considered a cave paradise. Chen Mo shoveled some soil from the ridge of the field to cover the blood on the ground, then threw a cushion and sat cross-legged to breathe. His aptitude is not high, and most of the spiritual energy resources in the already barren first-level spiritual vein are absorbed by the spiritual plants, resulting in a long time and a lot of effort to sense a trace of weak spiritual energy, and Chen Mo can only rely on these gossamer-like spiritual energy to recover. This sitting lasted for 3 hours until the sky gradually darkened and night fell. In the night of the immortal world, never sleep in the wilderness, even the spiritual field is not allowed. No one knows whether there will be unknown evil spirits that will take the life of the spiritual plant husband at will. In the next 2 days, Chen Mo meditated and practiced in the spiritual field during the day and returned to the cabin to rest at night. In this way, he just made up for the 90% loss of spiritual energy. It's really a case of fishing in a dry pond. Chen Mo was a little helpless. 3 days and 8 acres had reached the limit of what he could manage. Early in the morning of the 3rd day, Chen Mo first came to Wang Lixia's field, knocked on the door gently, and said, "Friend Wang, I'm here to make rain." After that, without waiting for the other party to speak, he began to pinch the formula to make rain, for half an hour, until the 5 acres of spiritual field were irrigated. The other party did not leave the house. Chen Mo didn't say much. The agreed delivery time between them was 6 days later. He had to make rain twice more before the other party would lend him a big pill first. After saying goodbye politely and returning to his own field, Chen Mo did not rush to perform the rainmaking technique. He had not fully recovered, and forcing rain at this time would really overdraw his body. Once the dantian is damaged, he will probably stay at the first level of qi refining for the rest of his life. Sitting in meditation and breathing, Chen Mo gradually felt hungry. The effect of the bigu pill began to dissipate. When it rains, it pours. Chen Mo smiled bitterly. According to this, he would have to starve for another 6 days. At noon, after recovering 30% of his spiritual energy, he began to rain on his spiritual field. 3 days later in the morning, Chen Mo completed the 3rd rain in the transaction. There were still 3 days before he could borrow the bigu pill, but the effect of the last bigu pill had disappeared 3 days ago, and he was already starving. After the rain was finished, Chen Mo endured the hunger and returned to Wang Lixia's door, saying goodbye politely, but just when he thought that the other party would not show up like last time, the wooden door suddenly opened. Wang Lixia, with a wrinkled face, walked out on crutches. "Senior, I'll come back in 3 days." Chen Mo was already a little weak at this time. Luckily, there were only 3 days left, otherwise he might really eat ordinary grains. "Take it. The next one will be given to you in a month." Wang Lixia took out a porcelain bottle from her sleeve, threw it gently, and it fell into Chen Mo's hands accurately. "Senior. Didn't you say you would give it to me in 3 days? Chen Mo was a little surprised. It's not easy for anyone to be a low-level spiritual plant husband. A bigu pill may not be a big deal for the monks of the family and sect, but for them, it means life and the path to immortality. Ahem. Wang Lixia coughed lightly. I finally found a fool willing to take care of my spiritual field. It would be a pity if she starved to death. After that, she walked back expressionlessly. Bang. The door closed. Chen Mo couldn't wait to open the bottle stopper, and a scent of medicine wafted out. Bigu pill. He was very familiar with this smell. He didn't say anything and put the pill into his mouth. In just a moment, the medicine began to dissolve in his body and nourished his whole body. The feeling of hunger gradually disappeared. Grandma Wang turned out to be a good person. Chen Mo sighed, not expecting that the other party had actually taken the first bigu pill in advance. This was really beyond his expectations. It seems that I found the right person. Chen Mo was delighted and returned to his field to meditate. On the evening of the 3rd day, just as he was breathing, a bright yellow Chinese character suddenly flashed before his eyes. Yangqi Ju +1. The experience of Yangqi Ju has increased. Chen Mo was a little excited and opened the panel immediately. Sure enough, the experience of Yangqi Ju increased from 43 to 44. Could it be that I can break through the realm without using linger? The system panel only shows integers, and the numbers after the decimal point cannot be seen, so Chen Mo does not know whether the experience of the 9-day meditation practice increased from 43.99 to 44, or from 43.01 to 44. But it is good news for Chen Mo that the experience of the practice can be increased without linger. At least it gives him hope, doesn't it? It's a double happiness. Everything will be fine. Chen Mo gave himself a cheering gesture. Chapter 4, First Trial of Flame Palm. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In the next month, Chen Mo's experience in the rainmaking technique soared. From the initial 36 points, it has now risen to 82 points, in other words, in at most 20 days, this most basic spell of the spiritual plant man will usher in its first transformation. However, in the past month, his chi-nourishing technique has not moved at all. It seems that the experience increase a few days ago was the result of a long period of practice. In his hands, everything is just a matter of course. In the 3 acres of spiritual fields, the spiritual yellow rice has begun to hang ears, and it is less than 2 months away from maturity. The spiritual plant man around Guchen Market has good luck this year. There has been good weather and good harvests this year. There has been no bad weather, no insect disasters, and no bird disasters. Everything is a thriving scene. It has been nearly 2 months since Chen Mo woke up. He carefully noticed that there was no news about the man in black clothes and bamboo hats from the market. It seems that the robber disappeared after succeeding. It is also possible to fly away. After all, once people knew that he had taken action in the market and killed the spiritual plant husband who farmed for Xian Peak, he would most likely be in trouble. Of course, as a spiritual plant husband at the lowest level, Chen Mo's source of information was also very closed, and it was not ruled out that the murderer had been brought to justice. In short, the death of the original owner had come to an end. There was no news about the murderer, but Chen Mo had heard some gossip about him these days. That day, the tenant in the south, Yin Zheng, who was a spiritual plant husband in the same batch as him, found him mysteriously and asked him whether Wang Lixia's time was coming. But when Chen Mo asked him back, the other party hesitated and talked about something else. Later, after asking around, it turned out that the whole area was spreading that Wang Lixia's time was coming, and Chen Mo deliberately tried to please the other party and intended to form a Taoist partner with him to inherit the other party's inheritance. Chen Mo was a little dumbfounded when he heard the news for the first time. But he was helpless. However, he had made a note of this account, and would settle with them when he became stronger in the future. That day, Chen Mo came to Wang Lixia's spiritual field as usual, knocked on the door and said hello, and then began to perform the rainmaking technique. To his surprise, not long after he started, the other party pushed the door open and walked out. Wang Lixia stood not far away and watched him for half an hour. Chen Mo finished his work and stepped forward, respectfully saying, "Senior, I will come again in 3 days." This time, the other party did not nod, but gently tapped his cane, and said with his cracked lips, "Have you heard the gossip outside?" As soon as these words came out, Chen Mo's expression became obviously embarrassed. Wang Lixia smiled contemptuously, and then said, "A bunch of mad dogs, follow me." After that, the other party went north along the ridge of the field. Chen Mo didn't understand, but followed him anyway. Soon, the two arrived at another spiritual field one after the other, and the spiritual plant husband here was busy meditating and practicing. Since they were not neighbors, Chen Mo didn't know the other party's name. As soon as the two approached, Wang Lixia put the cane in her hand on the ground, and her 2 old and dry hands quickly made a seal, and a blazing fire palm came in an instant, heading straight for the spiritual plant husband. In a panic, the other party could only dodge, but this was a full-strength attack from the 3rd level of chi refining. How could he dodge it? With a muffled sound, the fire palm hit the other party's shoulder, and half of his body was instantly burned black. "Friend Wang. What do you mean?" He Jiping's face was extremely ugly. While breathing, he looked at the old woman vigilantly. "I am old, not dead. If I hear those gossips again, don't blame me for dragging someone down with me on the road to the underworld." After saying that, Wang Lixia heavily pounded the cane she picked up. In the early years, she had never been a Taoist partner with anyone in her prime, and she never thought that after her body was weak and broken, she would be slandered. How could she tolerate this? Chen Mo, who was standing behind him, witnessed the whole process. The flame palm Wang Lixia used, like the rainmaking technique, was almost a standard skill that all spiritual plant masters could use, but the flame palm in the opponent's hand was completely different from the steaming palm technique he had just learned. It could even leave the body and become a long-range attack. "So the flame palm is so strong," Chen Mo said in his heart, and he also made up his mind that after he became proficient in the rainmaking technique, he must devote some energy to practicing the flame palm, which was his only magic. Wang Lixia was reluctant to speak. After teaching He Jiping a lesson, she turned around and left. Her old back and hunched body gave people a feeling of fragility. But as the only person in the area of 100 acres who was at the third level of qi refining, no one dared to touch her brow. What's more, the opponent's death was almost certain, and it was not a wise move to provoke her at this time. Senior, I would like to ask you, at what level can the flame palm be as powerful as you just now? Wang Lixia stopped and turned her head slightly. A scornful smile appeared on her face. 40 years ago, I learned that my realm was stagnant and could not be advanced, so I kept practicing the flame palm. What do you think? Great success. Chen Mo asked tentatively. Great success. Wang Lixia's expression froze, and a little turbid eyes revealed a hint of complexity. How can a spiritual plant master like you master the great success? That without waiting for Chen Mo to ask, the other party continued. In the mastery realm, the flame palm can leave the body, and in the minor success realm, the power is greatly increased. Just minor success. Chen Mo nodded slightly and took note of it secretly. After returning to his farmland, Chen Mo began to meditate and recover after making clouds and rain. 2 hours later, he stood up and gathered his spiritual energy in his hands. The next moment, heat rose between his hands. Following the route of exercise in his memory, he punched a few times, and after just a few breaths, the spiritual energy that had just recovered less than 10% instantly ran out. So much consumption. Chen Mo, who had been busy taking care of the spiritual field, only realized how much offensive spells consumed the body. And at this moment, bright yellow words suddenly appeared, Flame Palm +1. Can I add a little experience after performing it once? Chen Mo was surprised. The consumption of the flame palm was beyond his expectations, and the increase in experience was also beyond his expectations. At this rate, its practice efficiency is nearly 3 times that of the raining technique. It seems that the practice of the flame palm must be put on a daily basis. Chen Mo made up his mind again. The time of farming, making rain, meditating, and practicing passed quickly. Before setting off, Chen Mo glanced at his own panel. Name, Chen Mo. Occupation, spiritual plant husband, unlocked, spiritual cultivation officer, unlocked. Lifespan, 28 out of 76. Cultivation, first level of qi refining. Skill, cultivation qi ju, 44 out of 100. Spells. Rainmaking technique, beginner 99/100. Flame palm, beginner 23/100. Talent, increased production, green. There is only 1 bit of experience left before the breakthrough of rainmaking technique. Chapter 5 Rainmaking Technique, Breakthrough. Great Harvest. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The spiritual rain was dripping, nourishing the spiritual yellow rice in the field. The water droplets hung on the rice ears, crystal clear. Wang Lixia's spiritual field was well managed. It seems that this year will be a bumper year with a good harvest. With the increase of experience, Chen Mo's rainmaking technique finally reached a proficient level. As for the experience required for upgrading, it also increased from 100 points to 200 points. After finishing the skill, a slightly staggering footstep came from behind. Chen Mo turned around, bowed respectfully, and said, "Thank you, senior." Wang Lixia did not speak, but took out a porcelain bottle and threw it over. These days, she has seen Chen Mo's behavior clearly. He is sincere and upright. He has been coming to this rainmaking spiritual field every morning for 2 consecutive months. Chen Mo calmly took the last bigu pill and clasped his fists again, saying, "Senior, after selling this batch of spiritual rice at the end of the year, I will definitely give you 3 bigu pills." Wang Lixia looked at the other party's serious and sincere expression, and a touch of kindness gradually appeared on her cold face. If she were immortal, she should have been a grandmother by now. The grandson should be as old as him, right? "My friend, I'll give you a piece of advice from an experienced person." Wang Lixia opened her mouth slightly. "Senior, please speak. If there is a chance, you should quit this spiritual plant husband." Chen Mo was stunned. The 3 words why were not finally asked. In fact, he also knew that there were not 1,000 spiritual plant husbands around Guchenfang City, but at least 800. but how many of them had reached the third level of qi refining? The vast majority were only at the first or second level. A bumper year like this year is not encountered every year. It is normal to have a small disaster every 3 years and a big disaster every 10 years. At that time, there was no harvest of spiritual rice, but the rent of Xian Peak would not be reduced by a penny. Therefore, for most spiritual plant husbands, the longer they stay, the more they cannot leave these 3 or 2 acres of spiritual fields. The more they cannot leave the spiritual fields, the harder it is to make a breakthrough in their realm. Fortunately, Chen Mo is different. As long as he is given time, he will have a chance to jump out of the vicious cycle that other spiritual plant husbands fall into. Thank you, Senior, I will remember it. Wang Lixia nodded and turned around a little lonely. She also knew that it was easy to say, but how many people could do it? A dying man's words are good, and this is just her nagging before the end of her life. Chen Mo naturally didn't take Wang Lixia's words to heart. At this moment, he swallowed the bigu pill and was walking back to his own field with a brisk pace. After the spiritual energy in his body recovered by 30%, he thought carefully and started the first rain. After becoming proficient, he took the initiative to integrate the increased production, talent into it, and the spiritual rain mixed with the spiritual energy of heaven and earth nourished the rice ears in the field. About half an hour later, when the last spiritual field became moist, Chen Mo also successfully finished the work, and this time, he was surprised to find that the spiritual energy in the Dantian did not run out as usual, but there was less than 10% left. The spiritual energy consumption has been reduced after the breakthrough of the rainmaking technique, that he had never heard of this before. Wait. Chen Mo suddenly realized something. According to Wang Lixia, although the rainmaking technique is a skill for spiritual plant husbands to make a living, it is enough to take care of 3 or 5 acres of spiritual fields to enter the entry level. No one would deliberately practice this basic spell. He had inquired that even Wang Lixia's rainmaking technique was only at the proficient level, and they did not have a golden finger that could increase experience as long as they performed it, so they would not spend a lot of time, energy, and spiritual energy to practice. I see. Now, with my current spiritual energy, I can almost irrigate 10 acres of spiritual fields. Chen Mo recovered from his joy and cast his eyes on the spiritual rice in the field. After the increase in production, he felt like new fruits were growing on the rice ears, not knowing if it was an illusion. There is still 1 month left. I hope the production can really increase before it matures. Chen Mo thought to himself. The next moment, he opened the panel. Name, Chen Mo. Raining technique, 1/200. Increase in production, green 1/200. The changes in the panel surprised Chen Mo. He knew very well that there was no experience behind the original talent. Increase in production. Increase in production, green. Incorporate the spiritual energy of heaven and earth into the art of moving clouds and raining to increase the production of spiritual plants. This talent can be integrated into the art of raining and other spells, and the production of spiritual fields will increase by 20%. It has been integrated with the raining technique. You can choose whether to integrate it when casting the spell. When this method is upgraded, the talent is also upgraded. Fusion. Doesn't that mean that after the talent is upgraded, the production of spiritual fields will increase? Chen Mo originally thought that the green talent of increasing production can only increase the production by 20%, but now it seems that it is not the case at all. You know, in the realm of magic, there are proficiency, minor success, major success, perfection, and transformation above proficiency. If so, can the increase production talent also be upgraded to level 5? At this moment, Chen Mo made up his mind to practice the flame palm and the rainmaking technique. In the next month, he took care of the 8 acres of spiritual fields every 3 days. After becoming proficient in the rainmaking technique, he only needed to consume 70% to 80% of the spiritual energy, and the remaining spiritual energy was used to practice the flame palm. As for the realm of immortal cultivation, Chen Mo has completely given up. 3 months have passed, and the nourishing qi technique has not moved at all. 44 points or 44 points. It seems that before buying the spiritual sand, there is no need to think about the realm, but this is normal. The spiritual energy between heaven and earth in this world is already thin. Even the genius cultivators of Qinyang sect rely on spiritual stones for cultivation, not to mention a casual cultivator like him who has poor roots, spiritual roots, and aptitude. 3 months passed in a flash. As the weather gradually turned cooler, the rice ears in the spiritual fields became fuller, the spiritual planters in Guchen market began to get busy. Some have already started to harvest the early maturing spiritual rice. In the next half-month, the grain collectors of Xian Peak will come to collect rent from each market and each spiritual field, and spiritual planters like Chen Mo and Wang Lixia need to harvest the rice before the grain collector comes and wait for him to come. As for the 110 kilograms of spiritual rice of Boss Wei, it is natural to deliver it to the other party after the grain collector has collected the grain. By the way, let's talk about the seeds for next year. The spiritual rice in Chen Mo's field was about to ripen. Before harvesting, he dug a big pit in the open space behind the wooden house. This pit alone could store tens of thousands of kilograms of rice. Of course, he certainly didn't have that much food now, but he could have it in the future. It's better to be prepared. After 2 days of hard work, Chen Mo completed the harvesting and ear-beating processes alone. It was only 3 acres of land, so it didn't take much effort. After harvesting, the spiritual rice was piled into a small mountain, weighted, a total of nearly 750 kilograms. Putting aside the 20% increase in production, that is to say, this year's spiritual rice has already increased by a few dozen kilograms, which can be said to be a bumper harvest. Chen Mo packed the extra 150 kilograms in a special sack for grain and buried it in the soil. Next, what he had to do was to wait for the grain collector to come. Chapter 6, Grain Collector. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Qinyang sect is located in the northeast of Wuqi State, built on the mountain. The main peak is backed by a long and distant third-level spiritual vein. There are several Jindan ancestors in the sect, and countless foundation-building cultivators. There are also 112 other immortal peaks, and the peak masters are also great foundation-building masters. There are several market towns, thousands of acres of spiritual fields, and countless spiritual pools under it. It can be regarded as a huge thing. Xian Peak is located in the east of Qinyang sect, thousands of miles away from the main peak. Every October in late autumn is the day when Xian Peak goes out to collect rent. From the horizon, a flying sword broke through the air. A man and a woman stood on the flying sword. The man's sword eyebrows and starry eyes. His eyes are sharp, giving people a very strong sense of oppression. The woman's skin is like cream, and her clothes are fluttering. If others look at her for a second, they will be shocked. Brotherly, the peak master is really a fool. It's just to collect grain, but you still have to come in person. The girl's surname is Si, and her given name is Yu. She entered Xian Peak 5 years ago. In just a few years, she has cultivated from an ordinary person to the 5th level of qi refining. The speed is very fast, even in the entire Qinyang sect. Therefore, in the 3rd year after entering, she was accepted as a disciple by the master of Xian Peak as an exception, and became one of the top 10 people in the peak. Junior sister, you are obsessed with cultivation and have little contact with worldly affairs. You don't know that where there are people, there are selfishness. Li Shangxian controlled the flying sword with his hands behind his back and went straight to the market at the foot of the mountain. The matter of collecting grain is extremely trivial. The entire Xian Peak has more than 10,000 acres of spiritual fields, and there are probably thousands of spiritual planters. It will take at least half a month to collect them one by one. Even with a flying sword, it is inevitable that it will delay cultivation, but even so, no peak master in Qinyang sect would entrust the matter of collecting grain to others. Only his closest disciples could take on this important task. This is a major event related to the development of the entire Xianmen. Mortals need to eat, and immortals also need to eat. Although the bigu pill is good, it is not a little bit worse than the spiritual rice. In addition, those spiritual birds, spiritual fish, spiritual livestock, and spiritual medicines are the foundation of cultivating immortals. How could they fall into the hands of others? In the early years, there were also peak masters who let the market collect rent on their own, but they could not avoid corruption and embezzlement. Over time, this matter became a convention and became one of the most important things in the Xianmen. Siyu muttered. Of course she knew it, but she was a little dissatisfied. Originally, she was cultivating well, but she was sent to be a grain collector. And she had to contact those lowly spiritual plant husbands and spiritual raising officials. She was really not in a good mood. Brother, the Guchin market is ahead, and the owner seems to be waiting there. Yes. Li Shangxian nodded slightly, controlled the flying sword to fall, and arrived at the next prosperous place in a short while. There are 37 markets under Xian Peak, and each market governs 1,000 acres of spiritual fields and a number of spiritual pools. To become a market owner, one must be a cultivator at least above the 8th level of qi refining. The two broke through the air, and a middle-aged Taoist greeted them with a smile on his face, bowed his hands, and said respectfully, Guchin market welcomes the two immortals to come. Owner Niu, you are welcome. Li Shangxian's face was calm. What the hell? Niu Yuliang pretended to be upset, but after a moment he regained his flattering look. Uncle Li, I've prepared wine and food for you to welcome you. No need, time is tight, we have to go to the next market after we finish yours. It's rare for you to come here, so let me show my hospitality as a host. Li Shangxian stared at him with his eyes fixed, and said, Landlord? Isn't the market an asset of Xian Peak? As soon as these words came out, Niu Yuliang's face changed drastically. He slapped himself in panic and said, I said the wrong thing, I said the wrong thing. Puff, such a funny scene made Siyu laugh. Sure enough, as my senior brother said, people in the market are very mercenary. Okay. Tell me, how many spiritual plant husbands are there in Guchin Fangxi? Guchin Fangxi has a total of 1,132 acres of spiritual fields, which were rented to 388 spiritual plant husbands as required. Among them, 155 also served as spiritual raising officers, raising 4,122 spiritual chickens, 3,111 spiritual ducks, 383 spiritual cattle and 383 spiritual sheep. Currently, there are 2,255 mature spiritual chickens, 1,291 spiritual ducks, and 77 spiritual cattle. There is also a spiritual pool. Niu Yuliang reported the assets in the market incessantly, which he must master. Every year, the peak master would send people to count the number, but even so, the market has ways to hide part of it and put it into his own pocket. Then I'll have to trouble Master Niu Fong to accompany us. Li Shangxian put his hands behind his back, and the flying sword soared into the air again. Niu Yuliang also sacrificed a flying sword and quickly followed. Chen Mo waited for another 8 days after collecting the grain. In the first 2 days, he tried to meditate and practice, and did not cast any spells. But facing the unchanged experience of Yangqi Ju, he gave up. With such talent and no spiritual sand, practicing is like cooking without rice, which is difficult to maintain. In the next few days, he cast the flame palm every day. In just 6 days, the experience of this offensive spell increased from 22 points to 60 points. At most, in 10 days, this skill will be mastered. On this day, Chen Mo practiced the flame palm as usual. Suddenly, a sword sound came from the sky, and 3 people arrived in the blink of an eye. The speed was beyond his imagination. Flying sword. Chen Mo was excited, thinking that one day he would also own a flying sword. The grain collectors were 2 men and 1 woman. A young Taoist priest stood on the flying sword and did not even touch the ground. Another middle-aged Taoist priest jumped down. Before he could speak, Chen Mo heard a sarcastic remark. There are people who learn such low-level magic as the flame palm. Siyu curled his lips, with a disdainful expression on his face, and just this one sentence instantly made Chen Mo lose all his favor for these 3 people, especially the female cultivator, who was very beautiful, but her nose was turned up to the sky. How can the status of a spiritual plant husband be compared with yours? It's good to have a magic to learn. Niu Yuliang half explained and half catered. Meet the 3 immortals. Chen Mo clasped his fists and said, although he was unhappy, his current strength was not enough for him to rise up. What's more, they had the support of Xian Peak and Qinyang sect. Where is the grain? Niu Yuliang spoke. Chen Mo turned around and took out 3 sacks from the house. Each bag contains 100 jin, a total of 300 jin. As soon as the voice fell, Siyu jumped lightly, stretched out his hand and lightly touched the spiritual rice, and disappeared in the next second. Storage ring. Chen Mo stared at the ring on the other party's hand. The shape and material were very simple, but the momentum contained was extraordinary. Such a storage ring would probably require a lot of spiritual stones. No. Maybe you can't buy it even with spiritual stones. Let's go. The next one, that the grain collector came and went quickly. In their eyes, a spiritual plant husband of extremely low status was not worth their attention at all. Chen Mo looked at the backs of the three people, expressionless, and used the flame palm again. Flame palm +1. Chapter 7. Going to the market together. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The trip to collect rent in Guchenfang City only took more than 2 hours in total. Niu Yuliang has indeed prepared immortal food to feed the 2 grain collectors who came down from Xian Peak. He must have it, and whether to eat or not to eat is not something he should consider. Seeing them fare well, Niu Yuliang suddenly asked in a low voice, "Uncle Li, have you caught the thief?" Hearing this, Li Shangxian stopped the flying sword he was offering, turned his head and looked at the other party with a meaningful look, and said, "Not yet. Does Master Niufang have any clues?" "There are no clues." Niu Yuliang shook his head. "Are you kidding? This is the person wanted by the Qingyang sect. How could he, a small shop owner, have any clues? Besides, even if there are clues, I don't dare to follow the pictures. Who knows what state the other party is in? However, 3 months ago, Tu Ling Jifu died in Guchenfang City." "Really?" Siyu, who was bored on the sidelines, suddenly became interested. "How did you die?" "Die with your heart out." Li Shangxian frowned. It seemed that the thief was indeed good. "Next time there is news like this, remember to report it as soon as possible." Niu Yuliang nodded sharply. I know. How could he not retaliate? He only reported it to his master. As for whether it reached the peak master's ears, it was beyond his reach at this level. It won't happen again. Li Shangxian looked a little unhappy, then he took out his flying sword and flew away through the air. Seeing the 2 of them disappear into the distance, Niu Yuliang's originally flattering face suddenly turned gloomy. 2 bastards pretending to be powerful. Bah! After sending away the 3 grain collectors and practicing flame palm for half an hour, Chen Mo returned to the house. At this moment, it was getting late, and it would take more than 2 hours to go to the market. Today was obviously not the right day. Before nightfall, when Chen Mo was about to take a rest, there was a knock on the door of his room. "Who?" "I am Yongyi." The husband Ling Ji from the south also asked him a few days ago whether Wang Lixia was the one whose end was approaching. Chen Mo thought for a moment and then opened the door. "What's the matter?" "Fellow Daoist Chen, are you planning to go to Fengshe tomorrow?" Yinjing got straight to the point when they met. "Good. Then how about we get together?" Chen Mo frowned slightly. He didn't want to have anything to do with the people around him. Seeing that he was hesitant, the other party continued, "Fellow Daoist Chen, Xian Peak has a great harvest this year." "So what? You and I both know. Do you think other casual cultivators know?" "You mean they will rob halfway?" Chen Mo asked. "That's right. So let's go on the road together so we can have someone to take care of us." It's a good suggestion, but it's hard to say whether there will be any danger on the road. However, the other party was just like him, a first-level qi refining person. "What can I do to take care of you? If we really want to meet someone halfway, why don't they both die together?" "No need." Chen Mo refused. Seeing that he was about to close the door, Yinjing quickly put his hand on the door. "No, fellow Daoist Chen. Just take me with you. The other person's name has changed. I'm just the same as you." Halfway through his words, Chen Mo suddenly realized the problem. If he doesn't look down on the other party's level 1 qi refining, then the other party must also look down on him. "Then why are you still acting like this? Is that so?" An old, rickety figure instantly appeared in his mind. "Fellow Daoist Yin, I'm sorry, I can't make the decision for her." Chen Mo clasped his hands and closed the door. Outside the door, Yinjing was sullen. Unexpectedly, the other party refused so simply. He also thought about going directly to Wang Lixia. but Ling Jifu next door had already tried it, and whoever went there was severely scolded. As a last resort, he thought that the current Ling Jifu was just like him, but at the first level of qi refining, normally, he wouldn't look down on her at all. Why? Yinjing turned around with a wry smile. News of looting has already spread from other cities. If you act alone at this time without anyone to take care of you, your hard-earned food throughout the year may really be robbed. Chen Mo closed the door and realized it after thinking for a moment. Yinjing's arrival really gave him a wake-up call. In this world of immortality where the weak prey on the strong, no strength is enough to protect oneself. Yes, Fengshe will protect their safety, but that is limited to the interior of Fengshe and Ling Jifu's cabin. As for the road, who cares whether you live or die? Early the next morning, at dawn, Chen Mo came to wait outside Wang Lixia's wooden house. After waiting for about half an hour, the door opened. When Wang Lixia saw Chen Mo, her expression didn't change at all, but she said calmly, "Bring your food." "Thank you, senior." Chen Mo was delighted. Unexpectedly, the other party guessed his intention at a glance and did not refuse. It seems that the water poured in these 3 months has not been in vain. Of course, Chen Mo was 70% sure when he came on this trip. He still owed her 3 bigu pills. If the food was robbed, she would also suffer losses. After a while, Chen Mo used a trolley to bring in 3 bags of 400 kilograms of grain. Logically speaking, apart from the rent, he should still have 300 kilograms left. Even if there is a bumper harvest this year, there will only be an extra 300 kilograms or 50 kilograms. According to the calculation of 100 jin per bag, 3 bags would only weigh about 300 jin. However, Chen Mo stuffed dozens of jin more into each bag. Under normal circumstances, it is difficult to detect that something is wrong, unless it is weighed. Wang Lixia glanced at his cart and said, "This year's harvest is good. God is awesome." Chen Mo said with a smile. "Awesome?" Wang Lixia was stunned. "God bless, God bless." "Hee, God bless." After a few breaths of silence, the other party continued, "A good year is not available every year. I advise you to save some resources for the next year's emergency." "Thank you, senior. I will help you pack the grain together." Chen Mo nodded. Seeing that the other party did not refuse, he put the remaining 5 bags of grain on the cart and set off for the market. On the way, Wang Lixia walked very slowly with a cane, and Chen Mo, who was pushing the cart, could not speed up even if he wanted to. I originally wanted to talk to her more and find out some information about the world of immortal cultivation, but this old woman hardly spoke. No wonder, everyone around her said that she had an abnormal temper, so Chen Mo accepted it. They walked for 3 hours, and the road was safe and sound, and there was no robbery as Yinjing said. When they arrived at the market, Wang Lixia, who had been silent all the time, slowly turned around and said, "I will wait for you here at noon tomorrow." Junior remembers. Generally, a trip to the market will stay overnight. After all, it takes a long time to sell grain and buy resources, and it will be dark when you set off again, and it is extremely unsafe on the road. I'll give you a piece of advice. The market is a gold-consuming cave. Take good care of your pitiful resources. Wang Lixia has seen too many spiritual plant husbands with poor self-control. Not long after the spiritual rice was sold, the resources in hand were not warmed up, and they turned around and gave them to brothels and gambling houses. The next year, they didn't even have money to buy seeds. Chapter 8: 20 Tales of Spiritual Sand Obtained. You are listening at novelfull.audio. In Chen Mo's memory, he still has some impressions of Guchen Market. He had already set foot in the world of immortal cultivation, but failed to become an immortal. He went down the mountain with other young talents who were eliminated. After being instructed by a master, he came to the market at the foot of Xian Peak. It was here that he met Boss Wei, and successfully obtained the rainmaking technique and flame palm, and officially became a spiritual plant husband. It seems that the market is very keen on recruiting spiritual plant husbands. They welcome people who work for them and have some qualifications for immortal cultivation. Pushing 400 kilograms of spiritual rice, he walked along the bluestone road from the gate of the market. There were small vendors on both sides of the road. The stalls sold various unknown skills. elixirs that were said to be collected in the mountains, or some broken magic tools. Chen Mo pushed and walked in, as if he was strolling in the antique street. Of course, he also knew that this place was really like the antique street in his previous life, and there were not many real things in it. After all, what good things can a group of low-level casual cultivators have? My fellow Taoist, I think you are a spiritual plant farmer. I have some top-grade spiritual rice seeds. Do you want to take a look? Chen Mo glanced at the other party. He has thick eyebrows, a square face, long hair, and a beard. He looks sincere and looks like a good person. Maybe he just looks like. He glanced at the sacks on the other party's stall again. It really exudes a strong spiritual energy. Each grain is crystal clear and looks very full. It is rice, but it is difficult to tell whether it is a seed or not with Chen Mo's current level of knowledge. There is no room for ambiguity about seeds. If you buy fake seeds carelessly, you will work for a month or two in vain and waste money. Missing the sowing season is really fatal. For those merchants who buy fake seeds, they completely disregard human lives and try every means to eat up the whole family. Of course, how many good things do scammers have? Chen Mo thought of this, stared at the other party for a second or two, and finally left a meaningful expression, and walked away without looking back. The vendor was not angry when he saw that the other party was not fooled. It is normal to be rejected in his line of work, and he would cheat as many people as possible. The vendors on both sides of the road in the market still sold some things that Chen Mo was interested in. For example, the practice of Gingjiniji, which can be used to eliminate insects in the ground and consumes less spiritual energy. However, the price of 10 taels of spiritual sand made him a little short of money for the time being. He had to ensure that he could eat first, then ensure cultivation, and finally add icing on the cake. The flame palm was not incapable of eliminating insects, but it consumed more. Soon, Chen Mo arrived at a grain collection station. There are several such grain stations in the whole market, controlled by different bosses. This is a business with a stable source of income. Cultivators who have a little strength and have some relationship with the owner of the market all want to get involved in it. Open the door to welcome guests. The 123 Liang grain station has been extremely busy these days. This year, Xian Peak has a bumper harvest, and there is an endless stream of spiritual plant farmers coming to sell grain. The waiter saw a customer and greeted him with a smile. Dao Yu, come to my house to have a look. How about I give you a price? Chen Mo nodded and walked in with the cart. There were 7 or 8 spiritual plant farmers standing in the huge store, and each of them was bargaining with the merchants. How to charge? Chen Mo asked. This year, the amount of grain produced in Xian Peak is not small. We will give you the price of 12 jin of spiritual sand per liang. How about it, 0.12 jin per liang? Chen Mo frowned instantly. In his impression, 10 jin per liang has almost become a customary exchange rate. This time it is 20% cheaper. Doesn't it mean that the part of the grain he increased production is equivalent to a waste? Chen Mo turned around and left, but he had only taken 2 steps when the waiter hurriedly stopped him. Dao Yu, please don't leave in a hurry. How about you give me a price? Sure enough, he asked for a high price and paid a low price. 9 jins and 1 liang. Impossible. I can't do it. Chen Mo pushed the cart again. Who knew that this time, the other party directly pressed the cart. 11 jins. 11 jins. This is the price this year. If you don't want to sell it, we won't keep you. Chen Mo pushed the cart out without any hesitation, but when he reached the door, the waiter still caught up with him. Dao Yu, stay. 11 jins and 1 liang, I can't sell it. Chen Mo shook his head. How many jins do you have? 400 jins. The waiter thought for a moment and said, wait for me for a while. 0.400 jins, excluding the rent, is equivalent to the output of 4 mu of spiritual fields. Generally, you have to reach the second level of qi refining to rent 4 mu of spiritual fields. Seeing that the other party was only in his early 20s, he could already refine qi at the second level. Even if he was only a spiritual plant husband now, his future should not be underestimated. So, the waiter ran to report to the boss. After about half a cup of tea, he ran out. What's your name, fellow Taoist? My last name is Chen, and my name is Mo. Your realm is very convenient. It's not convenient. Chen Mo refused very straightforwardly. The waiter smiled embarrassedly and whispered in his ear. Well, I just reported to the boss. According to the price of 10 kilograms in previous years, I bought your 400 kilograms of grain, but you have to sign a verbal agreement with us. Chen Mo frowned again. Don't worry, it's just a verbal agreement. The agreement is very simple. In the future, the grain will be sold to our first, second and third grain stations first, that if it is just a verbal agreement, the other party's request is indeed not excessive, priority does not mean necessity, there is still room for maneuver. This is also the measurement commonly used by various grain stations. After thinking for a long time, Chen Mo nodded and said, okay, but I can only sell you 200 kilograms this time. Why? The waiter's face was instantly unhappy. He talked for a long time and applied to the boss to get this price, but the other party only sold half. Isn't this playing a trick on him? The remaining 200 kilograms, I will pay to Nyoja shop as an introduction fee. Nyoja. The waiter swallowed back halfway through his words. How many kilograms did you collect in total? About 800. 200 kilograms for the introduction fee. Chen Mo nodded. The waiter hesitated for a moment and said, okay, 200 kilograms is 200 kilograms. Wait a minute, I will weigh the grain with you. It took an incense stick of time for the two parties to reach a deal. At this moment, Chen Mo also had 20 taels of spiritual sand in his pocket. Spiritual sand is a hard currency in the market, and 100 taels of spiritual sand is equivalent to a low-grade spiritual stone. Of course, since spiritual stones are too precious, few people can trade directly with spiritual stones. After taking the money, Chen Mo pushed the remaining spiritual rice out. Of the 123 grain station, the waiter looked at his back and spat, damn, they are still evil. The spiritual plant farmers worked hard for a year, but only got less than 30% of the grain. Oh, yes, you have to pay for the seeds. Going along the main road of the market, there are more shops on both sides of the road. These days are the days when the spiritual plant farmers sell grain, and all the women in the brothels are out, and they are trying their best to seduce the farmers who have never seen the world. Chen Mo took a closer look. It's a magnificent sight. However, he made up his mind not to go to such a place before he had no money and strength. Chapter 9. The first trip to the market ends. You are listening at novelfull.audio. The Nyo family shop is very big. Chen Mo felt that this shop was unusual when he first came here. To be able to rent the spiritual fields under the jurisdiction of the market to a mortal who has not yet started practicing, he must be very powerful, otherwise, he would not have used this shop as a shield at the number 123 grain station just now. Chen Mo also inquired about it. The head of the market was also surnamed Nyo. He guessed that if it was not him, it was a relative. The entrance to the Nyo family shop was guarded very strictly. Anyone who came in had to be checked by the guards at the door before being allowed in. However, it was the grain selling season, and the shop still opened a special passage for them, the spiritual plant husbands, to pass through. Chen Mo followed the team, and there were at least 10 people in line. These spiritual plant husbands like him pushed large and small carts with bags of spiritual rice on the carts, and their faces were filled with joyful smiles. It was a good harvest. Who wouldn't be happy? After waiting for about half an hour, Chen Mo finally entered the yard. The carts were lined up in a row. In the crowd, Chen Mo saw Boss Wei, who had received him at the beginning. Boss Wei looked to be in his early 30s. His strength was unknown, but it was certain that he was at most in the early stage of qi refining. His status in the Nyo family shop was average. He could have a say, but he could not make decisions. Soon, Boss Wei also saw him, so he greeted him with a smile. Fellow Taoist Chen, long time no see. Chen Mo bowed and said, greetings, Boss Wei. Thanks to you, the harvest this year is not bad. This time I came to pay the introduction fee I paid on credit. Wei Wuwei glanced at the half bag of spiritual rice on the cart and frowned slightly. How much is this? 150 caddies. 200 caddies. Hearing that it was 200 caddies, Wei Wuwei was relieved immediately. Not bad, not bad, it's good to be able to harvest 500 caddies in the first year of farming. In fact, the first year of being a spiritual plant husband is the most difficult. Many cultivators, due to lack of experience and poor management, often cannot harvest 200 jin per mu, and some even harvest less than 100 jin. However, this kid is also lucky, and he actually encountered a bumper year in the first year. Boss Wei, please deduct the 110 jin I owe you, and please exchange the remaining 90 jin for spiritual sand or fasting pills. Chen Mo said frankly, he was not afraid that the other party would greedily take the grain. At the beginning, he could give him seeds on credit, so he naturally would not be interested in these 30 or 50 jin. Wei Wuwei looked at Chen Mo and pondered for a moment. He did not speak. After about 20 breaths, he spoke. How about this? I think it is not easy for fellow Daoist Chen to be a spiritual plant husband in the first year. I will charge you 80 jin for the introduction fee and the seed money, and I will give you 12 fasting pills for the remaining 120 jin, which is just enough for your consumption next year. How about it? Boss Wei's word surprised Chen Mo a little. On second thought, it seems not impossible. After all, according to his performance, he only collected 500 kilograms. If he paid all the rent, he would get 90 kilograms, which is 9 bigu pills. It is not enough for his daily consumption, let alone cultivation improvement. It seems that sometimes crying poor is also a good way. Thank you, Boss Wei. Chen Mo bowed with both hands, but this kind of seeds. Wait a moment. Wei Wuwei turned and left. After a while, he returned to the yard. I will give you another kilogram on credit. Next year, it will still be 110 kilograms of Linghuang rice. Thank you so much, Boss Wei. The seeds are the same as last year. Come to the shop in February to get them. I'll remember it for you. Okay. Then, Wei Wuwei asked the waiter who was doing the work to push a cart of spiritual rice to the scale. After a while, the other party came back with a porcelain bottle. Here are 12 bigu pills, please check. Chen Mo opened the bottle stopper, and the fragrance of medicine filled the air. It is bigu pills, and the quantity is correct. He nodded and stuffed it into his waist. Chen Dao Yu, if you have something to do, go and do it first. The shop has been very busy these days. Please forgive me for any trouble. Wei Wuwei greeted him. No, just do your thing. In Chen Mo's eyes, this person in charge has a high EQ. He can be so polite to a little spiritual plant husband, so his future will not be bad. If he can make friends with him, it would be a good choice. After leaving the Niu family shop, Chen Mo took a huge sum of money and went to the market again. Whether it was listening to music in the brothel or gambling, he could restrain himself and did not step into it. He even did not spend half a tael of spiritual sand on those vendors who picked the best and picked up bargains. These are all resources for his cultivation in the next year. Wealth, dharma, friends and land, resources are the most important thing. With a golden finger, he can make steady progress and improve step by step. There is no need to take the risk of being cheated and pick up bargains. How can the buyer be as smart as the seller? The next morning, Chen Mo waited at the gate of the market. After waiting for more than half an hour, Wang Lixia, leaning on a cane, slowly walked over on the bluestone slabs. As soon as they met, Chen Mo presented the 3 prepared fasting pills with both hands. Thank you, senior, for helping me overcome the difficulties. Wang Lixia raised her eyebrows slightly, took the fasting pills casually, and when she looked at him again, her impression was a little better. Let's go. Chen Mo followed behind him, walking very slowly. Along the way, it was relatively peaceful at the beginning, but what was supposed to come still came. When the two walked out for 20 to 30 miles, Wang Lixia suddenly stopped, clenched the cane in her old right hand, hit it hard, and said in a hoarse voice, "Who are you? Why don't you come out?" Instantly, 2 masked middle-aged monks rushed out of the woods. The moment they appeared, Wang Lixia frowned. Although the 2 monks in front of her were masked, they gave her a sense of oppression. If her guess was correct, both of them should be at the 3rd level of qi refining. Although the 3rd level of qi refining is nothing in the market, it is probably considered a master among the spiritual plant husbands. The 2 robbers were obviously stunned when they saw Wang Lixia. Soon, their eyes moved to Chen Mo behind her. This fellow Taoist, you can go over, the person behind must leave money for the way. One of the masked monks said. Humph! There was a cold snort in the nose, and the next moment two powerful flame palms instantly penetrated the body and went straight to the two. Wang Lixia didn't give the other party a chance to speak. Having been a spiritual plant husband for so many years, this kind of thing has long been commonplace. These robber monks are either spiritual plant husbands like her, or black miners who sneaked out of the mine. Even if they are both at the third level of qi refining, she thinks that she can definitely suppress them with her fire palm skills. Sure enough, after Wang Lixia's brazen attack, the two men also realized that they had encountered a tough guy. After hurriedly dodging, they ran back to the woods without saying a word. They just came to bully the weak. There is no need, and it is impossible to fight these spiritual plant husbands. Seeing that a fire palm forced the robber monks to flee, Chen Mo became more determined to practice this spell to a small success. Chapter 10 The Disappeared Neighbor, The Flame Palm Breakthrough. You are listening at novelfull.audio. With Wang Lixia's escort, the whole market went smoothly. Even if they encountered danger, they were easily resolved by the other party's desperate behavior. The two returned to Wang Lixia's spiritual field. Chen Mo thanked and said goodbye and returned to his own field. However, before he could sit down, his colleagues from the south came to the door. Yinjing could almost be regarded as guarding them in the field. His purpose of coming here was also very clear, which was to find out if there were any robbers or dangers on the way to the market. Chen Mo's answer was also very straightforward. After saying no, he immediately turned around and went back to the house. After getting a satisfactory answer, Yinjing was relieved and a happy smile appeared on his face. He was so excited that he didn't even say thank you when he left. The other party asked if there was any danger on the way there, and there was indeed no danger. He didn't ask about the way back. Chen Mo complained in his heart. He didn't like this guy who gossiped behind people's backs. Seeing the other party leave, Chen Mo was not idle either. He went straight to the place where he practiced in the center of the spiritual field. At this moment, there were still some rice stalks standing in the harvested field. A gust of wind blew and rustled. Sitting cross-legged, Chen Mo carefully took out one or two spiritual sands from his arms. This kind of debris that is not even a spiritual stone can only be held in the palm of your hand, but even so, the spiritual energy it contains is hundreds of times more than the spiritual energy scattered between heaven and earth. In the world of cultivating immortals, what you cultivate is resources. Even if you have low talent, as long as you have endless resources, you can also form a pill. The spiritual sand was in hand, shining with a crystal luster under the sun. Chen Mo clenched his right hand into a fist, and the internal qi nourishing technique began to operate. Gradually, the spiritual energy in the spiritual sand began to flow into his body. About 3 or 4 hours later, it was getting dark. Chen Mo's qi nourishing technique operated for several big cycles. He spread out his hands, and the spiritual sand in his hands was almost not reduced, and it was still so dazzling. As for how much experience he had accumulated, it was still unknown in one day. In the next few days, Chen Mo concentrated on practicing the Yangqi Ju. Although this method was common, and even simplified from other methods, almost every spiritual plant husband practiced it, but it was said that there was still a chance to practice it to the foundation. Before there were other methods, he could only practice. The days of meditation and practice passed quickly. On this day, Yinzheng in the south finally plucked up the courage and set off to the market with his less than 100 kilograms of food, and after this departure, Chen Mo never saw him come back again. On the 5th day, the panel that had been calm for a long time finally jumped. Yangqi Ju +1. At the same time, the spiritual sand in Chen Mo's palm was almost only half left. 5 more days later, when the first 2 spiritual sands were completely exhausted, Yangqi Ju finally added another point. Can 1 ounce of spiritual sand provide 2 points of experience? The reason why he did nothing during these 10 days and practiced the Yangqi Ju with all his heart was to master his progress. In this way, 20 ounces of spiritual sand can provide 40 points of Yangqi Ju experience. If it's fast, he can break through to the 2nd level of qi refining in another year. Chen Mo also knew that although this practice speed was slow, it was stable. As long as there were spiritual sand and spiritual stones, he could constantly increase experience and break through, without worrying about bottlenecks. Since the experience that spiritual sand could provide had been tested, Chen Mo would not focus on this one only. Next, he practiced meditation during the day and practiced the flame palm in the house at night. However, every time he practiced the flame palm, Chen Mo did not dare to practice until his spiritual energy was completely exhausted. But only practiced it twice a day to ensure that the experience increased while not delaying the practice of the next day. With the addition of the practice of the flame palm, the originally slow speed slowed down again. The spiritual sand was still consumed at 1 ounce every 10 days, but on the 12th day, the experience of the Yangqi Ju only increased by 2 points, but Chen Mo knew that it was all worth it. Time passed quickly. The climate at the foot of Xian Peak also changed from biting cold wind to spring chill. Zhang, the spiritual plant husband in the field next door, never came back. Fortunately, there were no spiritual rice seedlings in the field, so it was okay if no one took care of it. However, the seeds would be planted in a month at most. Otherwise, if the sowing season was wrong, the land would have to be left barren. That day, Chen Mo walked around the other party's spiritual field for a long time. After looking and comparing again, an idea came to his mind: why not take these 2 acres of spiritual fields? But in this way, once the seeds are planted, at the speed of his natural recovery of 90% of his spiritual energy in 3 days, he must rely on spiritual sand to recover if he takes care of 10 acres of spiritual fields. And before the spiritual sand is consumed, he must complete the second breakthrough of the rainmaking technique. After a simple addition, subtraction, multiplication and division, Chen Mo came to a conclusion that he could do this. For a monk, being able to endure loneliness is a compulsory course. Wang Lixia would occasionally walk out of the wooden house and look into the distance. When she could always see Chen Mo meditating in the fields day after day, a wave of emotion rose in her heart. Once upon a time, she was just like him. She was obsessed with cultivation, hoping that one day she could accumulate a lot of experience, successfully build a foundation in her lifetime, and embark on the path of a true monk. But an insect plague completely shattered her idea, and from that year on, she was exhausted, and the spiritual rice in the following years was paying off the debt of that year. Since then, she has no resources and her realm has stagnated. In the end, as she got older day by day, she no longer had the possibility of breaking through the 4th level of qi refining. It's great to be young. A sad look appeared on Wang Lixia's old face, and she turned back to her room. A flame palm ended the exercise. With the sudden appearance of flame palm +1 in front of him, Chen Mo stopped immediately. He opened the panel, and the flame palm, which originally had only 20 experience points, successfully broke through the entry level and entered the proficient level. He was very happy. Although this panel cannot add points by itself, every step of practice will give him positive feedback, so that as long as he pays, he will definitely get rewards. This is enough. Tang. The next second, Chen Mo's hands were ignited with raging flames. The fire was more than 10 times stronger than the previous entry level. Although this palm could not leave the body like Wang Lixia, if it hit a person who was at the same level of qi refining as him, he would lose half his life if he didn't die. Day after day, hard work all day. This is the reward. Chen Mo was extremely happy. With the improvement of his strength, his ability to protect himself increased by another 3 points. On this day, there were still 22 days before the day agreed with Boss Wei to buy seeds, and 25 to 30 days before spring plowing and sowing. However, Chen Mo did not wait any longer, but came to Wang Lixia's door again. He wanted her to accompany him to Guchenfang market again.